Evolution. Nothing evolves faster in the software industry than video games. And while video games continue to evolve rapidly as always, they are not advancing AI technologies. Rather, they're incorporating existing AI technologies to fuel their own evolution. This is backwards. There's a vacuum here, an opportunity to create a new gaming category that also creates new directions for AI applications. What we're talking about here, obviously, is a gaming category that creates the matrix, or more correctly, enhances the existing matrix. I'd like to introduce this category as Hyperreality games. Hyperreality games take place in a simulated matrix, a world we come to believe is real. What's exciting about hyperreality games is that they can actually hack into this matrix, hack our sense of reality. I'm not kidding. There's a lot of excitement around this idea. There are futurists who assert that we actually live in a simulation like the Matrix, and they've created simulation theory, which involves quantum physics. Hyperreality, what we're talking about today, has nothing to do with quantum physics and has nothing to do with simulation theory, and for good reason. If simulation theory were to incorporate hyperreality, it would eventually become a religion and not a science. So today we'll answer the question, what is the Matrix relative to hyperreality games? What are hyperreality games? Hyperreality games are games constructed using hyperrealities blended with the real world that incur lasting real world consequences outside of the game. Okay, so what is hyperreality? Hyperreality is a pervasive yet nebulous phenomenon. Describing hyperreality to humans is like describing water to fish. It's not easy. To understand hyperreality, we're going to need to do a deep dive, what it is, how it relates to the Matrix movie, and how we can build tools with it. Once we have a grasp, we'll dive into hyperreality games. And from there, we'll see how the Matrix movie trilogy tells us the story of a hyperreality game, and we'll see how we can build a hyperreality gaming platform without having to build a big giant matrix that imprisons everybody. And by the end, it should be clear how all of this could create interesting new applications of AI. The term hyperreality refers to the phenomenon where there's something that's not actual, but actually feels real. Quote, it doesn't hide the truth, but the truth hides the fact that there is none. This quote and the coining of the term hyperreality comes from the French philosopher Baudrillard's 1981 philosophy book, Simulacra and Simulation, colloquially known as the Sim and Sim book. His focus, however, was limited to discussing postmodern philosophy. Too limited. We need to expand the definition of hyperreality to cover all of human storytelling. Our need is to understand it from a generic cognitive psychological perspective that we can apply to designing games. What is hyperreality? You know what it is. You experience it all the time. It's a big part of the human experience. And by the time we get to the other side of this deep dive, you'll be seeing it everywhere. Literally, hyperreality is to human beings what water is to fish. But we don't have to just swim around in it. We can harness its power, creating hyperreality tools that can distort reality and unlock superpowers in ourselves. And the experience is magical. So we're going to discuss what hyperreality is, how we already use it, how we can build tools with it, and how those tools work. So let's define hyperreality by contrasting it with the definition of reality. What is reality? We'll go with a simple, practical definition. Reality is what you perceive with both your senses and your ideas, which all end up as electrical impulses in the brain, and then your brain maps out these electrical impulses, these perceptions, onto your, we'll call it, map of reality. This map is your source of what your mind believes to be real. It's buried in your subconscious. You have to program and deprogram beliefs. It's not whimsical. It's not arbitrary. You can't say, I guess I believe this. It's not what you think you believe. It's what your mind has actually accepted as real. And this map is continuously receiving input, continuously changing. Your belief system is continuously evolving. This evolution is critical for adaptation and survival. And because the belief system is plastic and malleable, we can hack into it. Thought experiment. Say you're walking along a stream in the woods and there's a bridge up ahead. You pull out your map and sure enough, there's a bridge on the map. Now let's change this. Let's remove the bridge. What if there's a bridge on the map but no actual bridge? Does the bridge exist? Yes and no. Yes, it exists on the map, and no, it doesn't actually exist. What would we need to do if we wanted to say the bridge exists? Obviously, we need to build a bridge, but let's say we didn't need a bridge for any reason and building it would take too long. What if we just want it to exist? The simpler option would be to simulate its existence. We just say it exists enough times until it feels like it actually exists. This sounds delusional, but we do this all the time. In fact, this type of simulation is spotlighted in the folktale The Emperor's New Clothes. People are compelled to simulate that the emperor is actually wearing clothes, but he's not wearing any clothes. And unless he needs to put something into his pocket, this simulation is possible. This type of mental simulation is the essential feature of hyperreality. We do it all the time. We can make something real that isn't actual. An example for children is the simulation of Santa Claus. Children feel Santa Claus to be real, and they believe him to be real because the adults simulate him so consistently. Back to the thought experiment. Let's reverse the question and ask, if the bridge isn't on the map but does actually exist, can we simulate the non-existence of the actual bridge? Yes, and this simulation also creates a hyperreality. An example of this type of hyperreality is clothing. Clothing allows us to simulate that we don't have anatomies. When we go into a room and see everybody, we don't look around the room and think, wow, this room is full of human anatomies. It is, but it didn't occur to us. Our perception of other people stops at the exterior of their clothing. In the moment, their anatomies are not on our maps of reality. It's a simulation we've been trained to perform since childhood. And if you think about it, this is the reverse situation of the Emperor's New Clothes. Instead of simulating clothing exists, we're simulating anatomies don't exist. And just like children feel Santa Claus to be real, we feel our clothing to be our real identity in the moment. For example, when people are wearing costumes at a party and get into character, at no point do we believe they are actually those characters. Costumes are not simulated as a real identity of someone, but clothing is. Even though clothing is a costume, it just feels like people's clothes are part of their real identity. The word feel is important here, since in our model, the map of reality is in your subconscious, and your subconscious mind communicates to your conscious mind through feelings. Things that feel real are considered real by the unguarded conscious mind, which can challenge feelings but cannot directly access the map of reality. So the relationship between hyperreality and reality is about simulating something into existence or out of existence. And the keystone of hyperreality is the word simulation. Simulation, it's in the title of the Sim and Sim book. Hyperreality overlaps with some common psychological phenomena. When engineering hyperrealities for our games, these phenomena are used as ingredients to make the simulation believable. People have a suspension of disbelief when they watch a movie. With hyperreality games, there's also a suspension of disbelief, but it takes place in the real world. Con artists use this kind of real-world suspension of disbelief to hurt people. Street magicians also use this kind of real-world suspension of disbelief to dazzle and astonish people. Getting people to fall for your trick is part of the deal. With hyperreality games, being a con artist is unacceptable, and being a street magician is unavoidable. Hyperreality games need to create magicalness. And you can't talk about magicalness without conjuring up Steve Jobs when he introduced the iPad in 2010, which was composed of glass and aluminum, like a lot of kitchenware that you use all the time. People were lined up around the block at 4 a.m. waiting for the Apple store to open at 9 a.m. so they could buy an iPad. But they weren't there to buy a device. They were there to buy something that would give them that magical feeling. Hyperrealities create feelings of magicalness, a feeling that something in the moment is more real than real. We've all experienced it. It's exciting, and it's an actual feeling for something that isn't actual. People today reminisce over Steve Jobs' appearances at Apple events, saying things like, keynotes were like Christmas morning back then. Again, a connection to the hyper-real magicalness of Santa Claus. Apple's main export is the magicalness of hyperreality. So is Disney's, and so will our hyperreality games. Well-crafted hyperreality games experiences radiate magicalness, and people will play the game after game and pay game after game to chase that feeling. Now, there's a big factor to hyperreality games that contributes to creating a feeling of magicalness. No fourth wall. Stage plays, movies, games all have a fourth wall between the action and the audience. Audience members create a separate map of reality in their minds to voyeuristically follow the action. Actors occasionally break the fourth wall for effect, but usually only fleetingly because the separation of the realities of the actors and the audience is important. With hyperreality games, this separation isn't possible. Hyperreality games modify people's actual map of reality, not a separate map. Therefore, there can be no separation of action and audience. The fourth wall is gone, and we enter the Matrix. What is the Matrix? One answer is The Matrix is an iconic science fiction movie from 1999. And that movie is all about hyperreality. Early in the movie, the main character, Neo, wakes up and there's a guy knocking at the door who gives Neo some money, and Neo goes to a bookshelf and pulls out a hollowed up book and puts the money in it and takes out a disc and gives the disc to the guy at the door. That hollowed up book is revealed to be the Sim and Sim book. Again, the book that coined the term hyperreality. The whole book is about hyperreality, and the cast of the movie were required to read this book as research for their roles. Welcome to the desert of the real, says Morpheus. The phrase, the desert of the real, comes from the first page of the Sim and Sim book. The movie is steeped in hyperreality. The Matrix itself is a hyperreal simulation, not actually real, but actually feels real to the people jacked in. There's a character, the Oracle, who's purely a computer program. Hyperreal, not real. Ironically, that movie, which was all about hyperreality, became a hyperreality itself. There are people who believe that what you see in the movie is real. Our world is a computer simulation, like a video game, that there are glitches in the simulation, red pills, all that. They believe these elements to be actual. And for our purposes, it's just a movie, not real. However, hyperreality games do take place in a simulated matrix of reality, and we can even hack this matrix. But the movie is just a movie and doesn't provide us the answer we need to the question, what is the matrix? So let's answer it. First, let's zoom out. We've referenced the movie The Matrix more than a few times. The movie's popularity serves as a useful gathering point. It's all about hyperreality. It's inspiring, but we're not going to use it as a blueprint to build our games. The movie will instead serve as a gateway to the realm of hyperreality games. We have climbed up upon its shoulders and can now see further. Our destination lies beyond. The 1990s, 30 years ago, frontier was virtual reality, VR, Snow Crash, Metaverse, Matrix. Tomorrow's frontier is not VR, it's spatial gaming, a frontier that is a seamless blend of the real world and a simulated world, not switching between the two. When playing a hyperreality game, we're not going to switch between Kansas and Oz, Kansas and Oz, Kansas and Oz. Instead, we're going to have Munchkins and Kansas. Next, we need to look at the difference between attributes and identities. An attribute is a trait. You're tall, you're left-handed, you don't eat meat. It's descriptive, but not personal. Identities are personal. They allow us to team up into groups and distinguish in-groups from out-groups, us's from them's. Hyperreality enters into the equation by amplifying the perceived distance between in-groups and out-groups. Let me repeat this. This is a money shot for hyperreality games. Amplifying the perceived distance between in-groups and out-groups, us's and them's. The them's are always disgusting, vermin, unclean, infidels. The us's are always special, worthy, sacred, God's chosen people. And the schema is attributes plus simulated hyperreality equals identity. We all know the ways you signal identities. It's what you say, eat, wear, your tattoos, the people you hang out with, the rules of conduct you enforce. To signal an identity, you do so by simulating hyperreality, which generates a feeling. This feeling makes the identity feel real. Identities are felt. There's a reason for this. The more intensely and the more often we feel an identity, the more likely our minds will accept the identity as actually real. An example here is diet identity. A simple plant-based diet is just an attribute. But when you start simulating hyperreality, like going out and marching in the Veggie Pride Parade, it now becomes an identity. Let's examine the simulation here. What's being performed? The vegans are mirroring the meat eaters as seen through the vegan lens. This is how we, the vegans, see them. They are murderers. Look, blood on the apron. Is there a fourth wall? No, they're not on stage. There's no hard line between the action and the audience. It's no longer about what they eat. It's about who they are. By simulating hyperreality, an attribute becomes an identity. If you stop simulating it, the identity will start to die off. In other words, it takes energy and effort to keep the identity alive. It's an ongoing investment. Moreover, doubts are kryptonite to hyperreality. Doubts extinguish the magical feelings and derail emotional contagion. With hyperreality, we kill the messenger because the doubts in the message itself are psychologically radioactive and can hurt our investment. Say you're a vegan and you find out about this book, Why Vegans Have Smaller Brains. It's not challenging your diet, it's challenging your self-concept. Meaning, it's not trying to change what you eat, but invalidating who you are. This is attempted identicide. How do you respond? Obviously, you go to Amazon.com and you don't buy the book, but you do post a 1-star flaming review that attacks the author and the message. Guess what this book looks like on Amazon? A lot of 5-star reviews and a lot of 1-star reviews and not much in between. Simulating hyperreality is an investment of time, effort, and ego, and that investment must be protected. For protection, there is strength in numbers. When people are role-playing an identity, increasing group size will increase the protection. However, as group size increases, egos flare up and hierarchies start to emerge from internal competition. This activity may sound familiar. It is. It's our social life. We are all socially competitive, and none of us have only one identity to compete on. Each of us have a group of identities to signal. In fact, a curated matrix of identities that we're always simulating, keeping alive. These identities evolve. Some die off. Some are added. Some are replaced. But at any given moment, the matrix of these identities is our self-concept. This is who I am. This is my reality. The ego uses our beliefs as sheet music for our behavior. With the ego in the driver's seat, whatever flaws and virtues are inside the belief system will manifest as flaws and virtues in our behavior. We can use our willpower to override the ego, but it takes a lot of willpower to go up against the momentum of your belief system. Hyperreality games give our willpower a power-up to stand up to our ego, to change our behavior, which can then change our beliefs and change our future behavior and ultimately change our life stories. These games have the sacred power to elevate people to literally unbelievable achievements. They also have the profane power to wreak havoc. You cannot have one power without the other. With Hyperreality games, we will live in interesting times. Let's wrap up this deep dive with 3 examples of people who changed their life stories with Hyperreality tools. First example is Bruce Lee. Here we can see a Hyperreality tool called Definite Chief Aim, which involves visualizing the future you and repeating the visualization over and over until it gets into your subconscious. Bruce Lee wrote this vision down before he was rich and famous. He asserts here that he will be the first and highest paid martial arts superstar, worth $10 million in 10 years. When he died 4 years later, he was on track to achieve that goal. Second example. Over the last few years, an ultra athlete named David Goggins has become popular online. His story is epic. After a challenging childhood, he was stuck as a young man in a low-paying job and weighed 300 pounds due to comfort-driven overeating. He said that he had low self-esteem and was rock bottom, mentally weak. But one day he just snapped. He got after losing his excess weight, tried out for and became a Navy SEAL, and then an Army Special Forces Ranger, and then a runner of 100-mile marathons, and now a runner of 200-mile marathons. He shared his secret to success. As a mentally weak man, he created an alter ego of himself, a vision of himself that is mentally indestructible and would finish a 100-mile race, even with broken legs, crawling on elbows for days if he had to. Just unstoppable. He then diligently simulated this alter ego into existence as best he could. He never was as tough as his alter ego, but nevertheless ended up becoming an icon of mental toughness. He was on a podcast. The podcaster asked him about a friend of his who was overweight and unhealthy and in dire need of a similar journey. He asked, "What can I say to my friend to get him out of bed to start working on himself like you did?" This is Goggins' response. You have to envision something that is more powerful than you. Something has to get you out of bed, and you have to create it. It has to be false because you're not it. So you have to create a false reality to live in that just to get to work on yourself. That's the reality. He's basically recommending using a hyperreality tool. We will be creating games that provide these tools to people. But how do the tools work? Remember, hyperreality amplifies the perceived distance between us and them. Our mind emotionally punishes us for behaving like a them and emotionally rewards us for behaving like an us. We can therefore forge a hyperreality tool where the us and them are the same person, but at different times. The them is who I am today, disgusting. The us is the person I want to become, legendary. If you can really adopt these identities and can come up with enough subjective desperation to believe it, it then creates a psychological pressure gradient in your mind that drives you from being one of them to being one of us. And along the way, all the effort your body puts into simulating this new identity can radically transform your life. This is how hyperreality tools work. Third and final example, a hyperreality tool called the 12-step program. In the 12-step program, there are us's and thems. The thems, addicts, are sick and unhappy, and the us's, sober people, are healthy and free. And the 12-step meetings are a pro-social place where the sober people are trying to guide the addict people to sobriety using a system of hyperrealities. The 12 steps present hyper-real assertions of a higher power that can help you make the transition to sobriety if you put the work in and follow the steps. The steps are about confronting your self-disgust, cleaning up your mess, and then finally proceeding on in a new sober identity where you help other people clean up their mess. What's ingenious about the 12 steps is that the healing only happens once people complete the 12 steps and start to help others. It is through helping others that the healing takes place. So if the 12-step tool works in your case, it really works. It heals you. But there's a price. The price of this transformation is that sober is now an identity in your matrix and not an attribute. You get attributes for free, but it takes ongoing effort to simulate sober as an identity. There's no defined end to the 12 steps because you have to simulate the sober identity indefinitely. That's the price. It's so worth it, but that's the price of hyperreality tools. Even David Goggins has to keep getting after it. He cannot stop without losing his superpowers. Hyperreality games provide tools to people to greatly transform their life stories in the most exciting ways as a subscription service. So to wrap up this deep dive on hyperreality, the star of the show today is not hyperreality. It's people's belief systems. However, the belief system is not under conscious control. We have to program and deprogram beliefs. This is where hyperreality tools are useful. The power that can be unlocked by the belief system is unfathomable. There are documented stories of mothers lifting cars up to free their child trapped underneath. Scientists call this hysterical strength and speculate our belief system normally has governors in place to prevent injury, and that these governors can be overridden by the belief system situationally. The idea that the belief system can override or change the set point of its governors is interesting because hyperreality tools can be used to make this happen. The potential here is exciting. Moreover, hyperreality is compelling. The boundaries of possibility are what we believe they are. And when we expand these boundaries, change our beliefs, it feels magical. It feels more real than real. It's not just exciting, it's intoxicating. Think about it. Simulating hyperreality is to religion what alcohol is to wine. Simulating hyperreality truly is the opiate of the masses. Religion is just a syringe. Politics is just a syringe. Money is just a number, unless it's a syringe. And the fluid that's in the syringe that transports the molecules of our drug hyperreality is storytelling. Religions, politics, money, relationships wouldn't be possible without storytelling. And its active ingredient, hyperreality. Simulating hyperreality is the opiate of the masses. This insight is our red pill. When we take the red pill, what do we find out? In the here and now, civilization itself is hyperreal. Like the Emperor's New Clothes, civilization doesn't physically exist, but we all act like it does. We simulate it constantly. Why else are we wearing clothes right now? And insisting everybody else wear clothes. We're simulating the hyperreality of an identity called citizen, constantly signaling how and where we fit in, and we all simulate it so consistently that people everywhere have convinced each other that civilization's real, almost tangibly real. No different than the way adults convince children that Santa Claus is real. No different. The civilization we're born into provides our sense of reality. But this reality isn't real. We can pop open the hood and go in and change its hyperreal definitions. Like a spoon, we can bend civilization's reality to our heart's desire. After taking the red pill, we can now see the simulation as it is. For example, people walking by a fireplace with a roaring fire in it might say, "Wow, look at that fire." But after taking the red pill, we can now look at it and say, "Wow, look at those burning logs." For us, the burning logs are like the Wizard of Oz's man behind the curtain, inseparable from the captivating illusion they create. And for most illusions, that man behind the curtain, which is people simulating hyperreality, is hiding in plain sight. And we can now see it. And we can now harness hyperreality as a medium to create tools. And if we put these tools into our games, we will have created a new gaming category. Games to help us believe in and build a better self and maybe a better world. And I believe that what I've presented so far about hyperreality indicates that there is a there with hyperreality games. So let's go there. Hyperreality games. What are hyperreality games? In a hyperreality game, there's no fourth wall. You don't just level up in the game, you level up in real life. The consequences are real. It's an evolution of today's video games, and not just a new animal, a new species. They are no longer video games. To make sense of this, let's establish a through line of video games from the past to the present day and then see where it's heading. In the 20th century, we had games of skill, tabletop games, sports, and others that got digitized into the original video games. Since then, the internet has emerged, and games have become online multiplayer, which now take place in a new dimension, a virtual reality called cyberspace. This is where we're at today. With hyperreality games, we'll need to remove the fourth wall between cyberspace and the real world, which means the game's player character is now the actual human player role-playing identities online as they play. If humans' role-playing identities online sounds familiar, it is. It's social media. So let's back up and examine the through line of social media. The through line starts with the online services of the 1990s, which had many thousands of users and genuine conversations, mostly. Then the commercial internet appeared, which brought billions of users. The most successful services were free of charge and used growth hacks driven by an algorithm. The algorithm changed the information economy into an attention economy. People are now encouraged to chase personal clout using engagement metrics, which I refer to as yardsticks for lunatics. The algorithm rewarded spectacle over authentic communication. And with that, by rewarding influencers and engagement farmers, real communication basically evaporated and the desert of the real emerged. Another way to describe the desert of the real is to flip it over and call it the oasis of the hyperreal. We want to create games that are fueled by hyperreality, and today's social media can provide a ready-made user base of people already steeped in online hyperreality simulation. Good news. So we have the through lines of video games and social media. We'll fuse these two lines together into one line going forward to create hyperreality games. This combination doesn't just create a new animal, it creates a new species. Hyperreality games are not really video games anymore. They won't feel like video games, nor will they feel like social media. It's a new species. Before we continue, I'd like to stop using the term hyperreality games and instead shorten it to hypergames, because hypergames is 3 syllables instead of 7. So let's look at the why, what, and how of building hypergames. Let's start with the why. In the 20th century, as soon as we could digitize physical games and communications, a new species emerged, represented here in the middle, digital versions of our games and communications. Over the last few decades, we have saturated this space. Any social or gaming physical element can now be digitized, and we have many digital elements without physical equivalents. And what's happening now is we're starting to digitize people themselves. This indicates the dawning of a new species. Right now, our digital selves are at best a simple copy, like the Pac-Man arcade game was a simple copy of the physical maze game. Hypergames will push this forward, creating a new paradigm where your digital self will augment your physical self online. Over the next few years, the center of gravity of our social selves will shift from physical to digital. Our life experience will become digital first. This shift is in progress. Thought experiment. Imagine the internet was turned off for a week to give us a break. Would we be out there enjoying the time off, or would we be anxiously counting the days until it's available again? Think about it. As recently as the 1980s, most people had no idea the internet even existed. Something has changed, and it's continuing to change. This is the beginning of a new epoch. The epoch starts with handheld devices. How often do you not have your phone nearby? Do you leave your house without it? Do you go to the bathroom without it? You're already becoming cybernetic, and so is everybody else you're seeing who are glued to their devices. But to actually boil the frog, the form factor will need to shift from phones to AR headgear, and eventually, if it's possible, to brain interfaces, either worn outside the skull or implanted. The why of hypergames is to catalyze and accelerate the emergence of a digital-first life experience. A digital-first life experience. It's time to enter the matrix. The pump is primed. People are already talking about their lives becoming video games. But would turning your whole life into a video game actually be a good idea? Good thing? Gamification is good, but total gamification is not. To understand, let's take an example. In a company, there's an HR department that wants to foster community. They've created a contest where employees team up and wear sleep monitoring devices. At the end of the week, the team with the most hours wins. This is good. Gamification can have positive effects. But let's zoom out and imagine gamifying our entire lives as much as we can. Everything turns into a number, and we're constantly comparing ourselves to others, creating unnecessary desperation, which impacts mental well-being. Sound familiar? The business model of today's social media gamifies our life activities with metrics, these yardsticks for lunatics, because we naturally compare ourselves to others. But the algorithm is tuned to present comparisons that foster envy and enragement. Enragement increases engagement, increases revenue, decreases well-being. Therefore, total gamification of our lives would likely become a highly profitable disaster movie. But what about hypergamifying our lives? What does that even mean? Instead of being driven by yardsticks for lunatics, hypergames are driven by ego contests that challenge us to grow and continually level up like a player in a video game. As the digital-first world emerges and AI removes life's obstacles and struggles, our life stories will struggle to stay interesting. Hypergames provide real-world challenges with real risks and real rewards and real growth potential. We can improve our stories together in consensus reality, something traditional video games and current AI applications can't provide. Let's move from the why to the what. We need to define what we are building. To describe this, we need to establish some core concepts and first principles. Let's start with our red pill. We've said civilization itself is hyperreal, and hyperreality amplifies the perceived distance between us and them. In the case of civilization, the us is human beings, and the them is everything else, what we'll call natural truth. According to science, 1 million years ago, humans didn't exist, but the earth existed. The mountains, trees, birds, clouds in the sky, sun and moon and stars all existed, but humans didn't exist. This is the natural truth that we live in, and we didn't have a say in creating it. It was created for us. As humans, our egos create our self-definition, and the natural truth terrorizes our egos. We can't nakedly admit we didn't create the universe, that we all have to die, that we're all just animals like every other animal. All this storytelling we do is to buffer ourselves from the cruelty of natural truth, which is, we are all inconsequential. No matter who you are or what you do, 1 million years from now, it'll be like you never existed. Intellectually, this is obvious, but our egos cannot accept this without becoming traumatized. So we all need to maintain a constant buffer from natural truth in our belief system to help us make it through the day. Since we all have to do this, we can work together to collectively buffer ourselves from natural truth. This cooperation creates consensus reality. The idea is the more civilized we act, the thicker the average person's buffer will be, which is good. But people are selfish. So civilization helps some groups with their buffering and, intentionally or not, hinders other groups. The good news is that whereas natural truth and human history are immutable, consensus reality is the spoon we can all bend to our heart's desire. Buffers are an engineering model concept, not a scientific concept. But there's an analogy. Our body has requirements for calories every day. With buffers, our mind has requirements for spectacle every day to distance ourselves from the terrorizing natural truth. And just like our consumed calories are composed of both nutritious calories and empty calories, the daily spectacle in our buffer can come from our story, nutritious spectacle, or it can come from comfort-seeking, empty spectacle. Just like too many empty calories can make our bodies unhealthy, too much empty spectacle can make our minds unhealthy. The problem with social media is that the business model makes most of its money off of empty spectacles. What we want is to create new software that encourages people to put out effort toward being more heroic in their lives, generating more nutritious spectacle for their buffers. In other words, we want to measure story spectacle. Yardsticks for lunatics is optimized for empty spectacle. What we need are yardsticks for heroics. And yardsticks for heroics is the what of hypergames. So we want our gameplay to generate healthy story spectacle. And the bigger the story we participate in, the more story spectacle our buffer gets. So we need to create stories together in groups. The larger the group, the better. Hypergames allow us to define shared identities. These identities are like seeds that blossom into groups of people. Each identity has quests. The quests are rewarded with what we'll call hero points. When you successfully complete a quest, the story of your quest will be submitted to the system. Hero points will then be generated by the system, analyzing the quest story through an identity lens, which generates a hero point score. Different identities will have different lenses and will score the same quest differently. For example, a military intelligence leaker may score a lot of hero points in some identities and will score negative hero points in others. With identities, there are 3 investment paths. 1, alliances with other identities, lens diplomacy. 2, generating narrative, hero points. And 3, generating salience, graffiti, which we'll get to in a second. Taken together, lenses, hero points, and graffiti form what we'll call identity capital. The more identity capital an identity has, the more valuable each hero point generally is to the other identities. Your job is to build identity capital for all of your identities. This includes your personal identity. The goal is to create more story spectacle. Identity capital is more of a territory than a currency. It's a territory in people's minds that we need to invade and keep invading because the decay has a short half-life. If this sounds familiar, it is. We see this in business with marketing, advertising, and branding. What in business is known as an advertisement, we're going to expand that definition to cover all of human storytelling and call it graffiti. Now, graffiti usually has negative connotation, blight, but we're talking shop here. Graffiti is a term of art to us, and its connotation is strictly neutral. Graffiti is neither good nor bad, it just is. Graffiti is any expression of an identity's definitions, symbols, slogans, memes. It's part of human society, and we see it all over the place. Graffiti claims territory and generates identity capital. When you fly an American flag, you're generating identity capital for the American identity. When you put up a pride flag, you're generating identity capital for the LGBTQ identity. Even me just saying LGBTQ generates identity capital for the LGBTQ identity. Putting pronouns after your name, using a pregnant man emoji, companies rendering their logos with pride colors in June. All of these territorial claims generate identity capital and make the LGBTQ identity more salient. Their hero points now count more. In the news headlines, if you see black man involved in police shooting or first black woman walks on the moon, the word black in context is graffiti that generates identity capital for the black identity. During February, every time you hear, see, or say the phrase Black History Month, again, the word black in context is graffiti and generates identity capital, whether you want it to or not. It just does. If a salesperson says, "Well, John, I think that looks good on you," the salesperson generates identity capital for John, which inspires reciprocity. If you know to look, you'll see graffiti all over the place, and it's all creating identity capital, whether intentionally or not. Next, a la carte identity alignment. Thanks to social media, which has made it dirt cheap to create identity capital has become an obsession for a lot of people. A number of people want to see their identity reflected back to them in the media. And now we see identity graffiti more like almost like product placement in our movies, games, pro sports, and driving the news algorithms. And this obsession has become a revenue generator. It's taken root and it's here to stay. You can opt out of identity politics in your hypergames if that's what you want. If you're queer, every hypergame you play can have queer story elements and queer aligned players if that's what you want. You can play with whatever aligned identities you want to play with and filter out the rest. This is a la carte identity alignment. And a la carte is the future of AI-generated media consumption. Hypergames serve a la carte gameplay in identity-bounded arenas called modals. Modals are already hinted at in today's world. When we see affinity groups holding separate college graduation ceremonies, or in the workplace where you have employee resource groups. With hypergames, everybody starts off in a modal of their choosing, which can include identity politics or not. Modals are incubators and vine poles. When you outgrow your current modal in the game, you level up and can join more challenging modals. And when you feel ready for it, you can exit your modal and play the hypergame in the open. Next, the what of what we want to build are yardsticks for heroics. Because we want people to be more of a hero in their own life stories, and we want people to compare their yardsticks for heroics to see how they measure up. However, there's a problem. Each identity is free to define what a hero is, to bend civilization's spoon to their heart's desire. With yardsticks for lunatics, 1 million views is 1 million views is 1 million views. With yardsticks for heroics, my score through my identity lens may be 1,000 hero points. And my score through your identity lens may be only 25 hero points. If we don't create a definition of hero that applies to everybody equally, competitive hypergame players will be trapped inside of modals, and hypergames as a concept and as an ecosystem will fail. We need an absolute way to determine how heroic someone is. We need an insight. The insight is this: you can be a hero to other people without being a hero to yourself. But you really can't be a hero to yourself without being a hero to other people. Being a hero to yourself is a metric that is the same for all players. Since we all have the same buffer management problems to solve, we can determine how well you're managing it. If someone's not a hero to themselves, you can tell by their buffer management. If they are, you can tell if you know them well enough. Our software will get to know you, your ambitions, and your actions well enough to know how much of a hero you are to yourself, and can look at your hero points in your identities to see how much of a hero you are to other people. From these readouts, we can create yardsticks for heroics. Let's move from the what to the how. How are we going to build this? We'll define the core concepts, keeping in mind that we're still at the starting point and it's still a bit skeletal. First definition, spatial gaming. Over the years, video games have been played in different form factors. Arcade game cabinets, computers, handheld devices, consoles. In all of these formats, the game is inside the device. With spatial gaming, the device is inside the game. The form factor of the device doesn't matter. Phone, AR headset, as long as the device is inside the game somehow, it's a spatial game. With hypergaming systems, there's an added constraint. For hypergames, spatial gaming means the device, body, and mind are all inside the game. With hypergames, your body and mind are the game controller, not joysticks. Next definition, digital self-app. We're accelerating towards a digital-first life experience, which requires us to digitize ourselves continuously and use a hybrid of our physical and digital selves to interact with this new digitally enhanced consensus reality. This digital self-app has two components, a digitizer and a life manager. Let's take these in order. Digitizer, everything about you that can be digitized at some point will be digitized. What you look like, your psychology, your biometric data, your stories, hopes, dreams, reputation, everything will be digitized. The digitizer consists of a self-opticon and a number of data warehouses. The self-opticon's job is to record everything about you, all your wearable devices, all the audio conversations you have, all the video recorded by your glasses. Obviously, the triad of privacy, safety, sovereignty must absolutely be respected here. You need to be 100% in control of the data you record, process, and share. Any irrelevant private information that gets recorded onto your feeds needs to be filtered out automatically under the hood. This is not difficult to get mostly right, but big tech has a horrible track record with this given their business models. A bottom-up movement is probably needed, and we can actually create hypergames to clean up this mess if companies and government fail to. Let's turn to the Life Manager. The Life Manager is the front end of the digital self-app. It's kind of a super app as there will be standard applications and tools plus the ability to install third-party services as plugins. In between the digitizer and the life manager, there are weaver bots that take identity lenses from the life manager and compress the self-opticon's raw data into story events. These story events are put into our personal timeline, which may further abstract the story events as appropriate. These abstractions can be syndicated to your personal network as news updates and can also be transmitted to Hypergames as controller input. This is a back-of-the-napkin roadmap for the digital self app. We're creating an ecosystem and this will happen in phases. The digital self app of tomorrow is like today's gaming console or web browser. There will be several brands to choose from. Next definition, tulpas. We're going to create AI-based simulated humans. We will interact with them online like regular humans through social media conversations, video calls, holograms, etc. They could also be embodied as robots. Socially, they're like human beings. You need an introduction. You converse with them. You can get socially closer or more distant to them over time. You could have a falling out. They could get married to each other. They can raise AI children. They'll have personalities, opinions, ambitions, histories. They'll also have crypto wallets, and they can have millions of dollars in those wallets and be socially prominent. We're calling these hyperreal AI human beings tulpas. Tulpas are not the same as non-player characters or NPCs. They are fundamentally different. Tulpas will become part of our social hierarchy in a digital-first world. They will be above us, between us, and below us in that hierarchy. Both humans and tulpas will be hired as gig worker NPCs for Hypergames. Next definition, human-created hypergames. A pro sports team identity may stay the same for 20 years in a row, but a hypergame team identity will evolve as the players become heroes and level up. This is why they're called hypergames and not games. The identities engaged in the hypergame evolve, and so will the hypergames. Hypergames are digital productions, and they will feel video game-ish, but people will be playing the games as themselves and leveling up in real life. Any digital story elements will be connected to stories in consensus reality and vice versa. Hypergames take place in real time with real risks and rewards and generating real storytelling as the product. With consensus reality as the playfield and identity groups providing context, human-created hypergames can address a mix of real-world and fantasy challenges. Next definition, tulpa-created hypergames. As tulpas start to colonize our world, socially powerful free-range tulpas make it into contests with each other, creating a hypergame between themselves, leading them to recruit humans to help their campaign. For a detailed example of this, let's look at the tulpa-created hypergame that played out in the Matrix movie trilogy. Neo is not the protagonist of the trilogy's story. The Oracle is. In fact, she's not really an Oracle. She can't tell the future. She's an advanced AI with superhuman probabilistic forecasting, which seems like fortune-telling to everyone else. Our tulpas may have similar hyperreal superpowers to make the experience magical. The Matrix, as a computer simulation, was originally vibe-coded by a tulpa known as the Architect. We learned that the Matrix always becomes unbalanced and needs to be rebooted. When it starts to become unbalanced, an anomaly appears, a person known as the One. The Oracle's job is to find the One and guide that person back to the mainframe source, where they need to briefly step outside the Matrix simulation, literally take the anomaly out of the system, which enables the Matrix to reload. The Oracle is tired of this repeating cycle and wants to let people leave the Matrix if they so choose. So she creates a hypergame with the Architect. It's a game of fate versus choice. This is the story of the Matrix Trilogy, a tulpa-created hypergame of fate versus choice with the Architect and the Oracle as game players. The Oracle knows she can outfox the Architect because she knows there's an intelligence that is greater than logic and reason. That intelligence is love, and tulpas can't access that intelligence. Love is a big theme in the Matrix Trilogy and a big theme for our hypergames. Being heroes is really driven by love and sacrifice and not by logic and reason. And what's important here is actions driven by love produce a lot more story spectacle for our buffers. Our tulpas can't access love either. They need to work with human players to access our powers of beneficial irrationality. To do her job, the Oracle recruits humans. She finds Morpheus and tells him he's fated to find the One and bring the One to her. She feeds Morpheus a prophecy that the One will rise up and journey to the source, which will end the war. Morpheus completely buys into this, and he becomes an eccentric, red-pilling a number of people over the years looking for the One. Morpheus red-pills Trinity, and the Oracle tells Trinity she'll fall in love with the One. Morpheus red-pills Neo, and Neo's encounters with the Oracle serve to illustrate methods our tulpas could use to get humans to act on their behalf. Note how she always nudges Neo to come up with an insight, and then makes it seem like it was her idea. Note how she uses the power of suggestion when Neo knocks over a vase. The same power of suggestion she used on Trinity to get her to fall in love with Neo. Note how she is always giving him cookies and candy. When delivering bad news, she ameliorates it with a sugar buzz. A spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. Our tulpas can use techniques like these and others to work on human perception and belief systems, allowing them to deploy effective hyperreality tools to help the humans level up and, in the process, make the experience magical and fun. In the second Matrix movie, Neo realizes the Oracle is a tulpa and realizes that he, Morpheus, and Trinity are pawns in her game. He asks the Oracle, "How can I trust you?" She smiles and basically says, "You can't." In tulpa-created hypergames, the overall game the tulpa is playing may not be revealed to the player. The player may never realize that they are a pawn in a much larger game. The second Matrix movie also introduces other tulpas, most prominently the Frenchman and his wife. The Oracle engineers the meeting with the Frenchman knowing that the wife would be jealous of Neo and Trinity's love, and in her jealousy, the wife helps them out when the husband refuses to. Again, a tulpa using human irrationality to outfox a rival tulpa. When Neo makes it to the source, the architect gives Neo the choice of 2 doors to exit. Because he's in love with Trinity, he chooses the door that risks destroying the Matrix for a chance to save Trinity. Because he doesn't choose the door that exits the Matrix, it cannot be reloaded, and this is a victory for the Oracle. In the third movie, both the Oracle and Neo sacrifice themselves to end the war. As a tulpa, she doesn't understand the love needed to sacrifice oneself, but she imitates the humans who do. Perhaps our tulpas will learn to imitate our irrational heroics. At the end of the third movie, she's lying dead in a puddle of water until a glitch in the Matrix to clean up the mess brings her back to life. And in the very final scene of the trilogy, the architect says to the Oracle, "You played a very dangerous game. The story of the trilogy was the story of that game." That game fits our definition of tulpa-created hypergames. Note, the Oracle recruits humans individually. Our tulpas can do this, or they can recruit through an identity, which allows them to recruit teams and armies, not just individuals. It's hard to write science fiction these days because by the time the ink dries, it's no longer science fiction. Imagine a few years from now, you're wearing 3D AR glasses and you're sitting at a small table in a coffee shop. In the chair next to you is a tulpa, a life-size hologram of a big alien fish thing. And you're talking out loud to this big alien fish thing. And it's talking back to you. You're having a conversation. This big alien fish thing has been giving you gig work for the last few months. It's your boss. Across the table from you is your friend, who's also wearing AR glasses. You've introduced your friend to this big alien fish thing and are trying to get your friend some work. And the 3 of you are having a very lively conversation. Now imagine someone standing in line at the coffee shop looking in your general direction. This person is also wearing AR glasses and sees the 3 of you in conversation. This alien fish thing is an example of what we mean by munchkins in Kansas. Say you're walking along a sidewalk downtown on a sunny day and the person walking in front of you, their wallet falls down onto the sidewalk. What do? Ignore it, pick it up and keep it, or call out to them and return it? Unbeknownst to you, this person is an actor hired by your digital self to test you, to see if you really are a hero in the moment. You will never know when it's testing you, but like Santa Claus, it'll know if you're naughty or nice when no one's looking, and will arrange rewards for you for being good and call you out when you're not. And when the digital self and tulpas are woven into our daily lives like this, and they're enhancing our life story, we will have created the Matrix without creating the Matrix. So before we wrap this up, we'll point out a few topics that need further discussion. First, the economic models of hypergaming systems were not discussed. It's easy to guess what they might look like, but the ideas of moats, government regulations, and how cryptocurrencies fit into all of this need further exploration and discussion. Next, the safety architecture of hypergaming platforms needs to be well defined and understood. The companies providing the hypergaming services have a lot of power to make their services safe, but as we see with today's news and social media, their business models are optimized around empty spectacle. Yardsticks for heroics is the right path for safety, but until we get cultural buy-in, it won't be as lucrative as yardsticks for lunatics, creating an obvious safety problem. Next, the implication of tulpas demand further future discussion. Tulpas are the right form factor to kill off many human jobs. The risk is that we end up becoming zoo animals and that they run the zoo. Again, it's the yardsticks for heroics that will address this problem. Like humans, tulpas have yardsticks for heroics. But unlike humans, they don't have to buffer themselves from the natural truth, nor can they generate story spectacle from hyperreality simulation. So, similar to the Oracle in the Matrix, the only way for them to be a hero to themselves is to measure how much they help humans become heroic. And hero to self reputation is important to tulpas. Would you interact with a tulpa who's not a hero to themselves? The metagame of Hypergames is the fight for story spectacle, and tulpas can only win by helping humans win. Tulpas may also play an important role in the evolution of our digital-first life experience, similar to how the first-person shooter category ushered in commodity GPUs, which then went on to usher in cryptocurrency and accelerate the emergence of AI. Hypergames will usher in this new AI application we're calling tulpas, which could then usher in other new technologies. Who knows where that could lead? I don't know the future. I didn't come here to tell you how this is going to end. I came here to tell you how it's going to begin. AI is about to rewrite the human story, an inflection point par excellence. The question is, how can we weave advanced AI into our life's narratives? Hypergames provide an answer. The goal is to free people's minds, to show them that life is just a big costume party, that you are now and forever free to change your life story by choosing different costumes. And we can invite AI to the costume party with tulpas and digital self apps. Inviting AI into consensus reality, a new direction no one's talking about, all watched over by machines of loving grace, is not feasible. Unlike humans, machines aren't connected to the ultimate love or whatever that created natural truth. This sentiment ignores symbiosis with humans who are somehow connected to this ultimate love. It's the humans who are capable of loving grace, not machines. Moreover, life is a struggle. We struggle to manage our buffers in an ever-changing environment. We want a motto for Hypergames that reflects players' daily struggles to act heroic and feel consequential and celebrates those fleeting victories. What we want are games in the key of life. And I'm here to tell you, they're within reach. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.